Hi, everyone. I'm Summer,
I'm Carrie.
and this is Hopelexia Podcast.
Join us to talk about sex, drugs, and self-improvement.
Hello, Robin. How are you?
Hello.
Fine. How are you?
I'm relatively well. as well as could be expected.
Yeah, it's kind of
Life
subjective,
circumstances.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, very much. So I'm Summer, and this is Carrie. I don't know
Hello.
how much Lilith told you about us, but she's running late, so we get to introduce ourselves.
Yeah, I actually have been listening to the podcast that she's been on, so
Wonderful.
So I've got a pretty good idea.
Awesome. That's excellent. So let me see. I can't trust my memory of late, so
Same.
I'm just going to see what she sent, the message she sent us about you. She says you have 3 neurodivergent children and you are her go-to when there's a parent that's having trouble parsing whether it's autism or conduct disorder.
Correct.
All right. So can you just kind of tell us about yourself so that the audience can kind of get to know you, and then we'll just kind of proceed from there. And she said she will pop in when she can.
Okay. Yeah, I have 3 children who are grown now, but I'm still supporting them here and there with their needs. I got to know Lilith because our children were in the same school district, and we met through the Community Advisory Committee for Special Education. Our children, my youngest daughter and her son actually played together. They were in the daycare together during these meetings. They were around the same age. But how we got on the psychopathy thing was because my middle son got all the way to 5th grade without being diagnosed as anything but a speech and language impairment. And there were behaviors that started to pop up around that time. And I'd taken him to a lot of different assessors. And as my attorney said, you assessed the crap out of this kid because there was something going on and we weren't getting the right, it just wasn't really helpful as far as suggestions for education and you know what to do and how to handle it. And it was finally one neuropsychologist that she really looked at everything. She looked at all the reports, everything back through practically when he was born. And she was the one that finally figured out he was on the autistic spectrum. But he really flew under the radar for years. You know, he was in regular ed. He got speech and language once a week. But there was definitely differences between him and my older son, who is not on the spectrum, but he also had a language disorder and he had severe learning disabilities, dyslexia. So when the older one seems to be taking up more of your time as far as learning needs versus the other one, like when my oldest son is dyslexic and people would say, well, don't you ever read to him? And then I had a son that was hyperlexic. So it's like, okay, look at this kid. He reads already. So it's like, no, this isn't, but I sent him to like a Montessori school at age 4. And in 6 weeks, he was like, he learned the sounds of the letters and he was figuring everything out. And that is actually one of the symptoms of autistic spectrum disorder. Not everyone has that symptom, but generally when you have hyperlexia, it's very likely because these kids look super smart at first because they can add and subtract numbers. They have some great memorization skills. And he was like, by the time he got to 1st grade, it was like, wow, this is the smartest kid in the class. He knew all the continents. He could read. He could add and subtract 3-digit numbers in his head. And these are all high functioning autistic spectrum disorder things, but I didn't know that. And this, my stereotype of autism at that time, I didn't know that much about it, but you always think of like severe autistics, kids spinning in circles or having intellectual disabilities. And he didn't do that. And, you know, and sometimes, and they would usually have a fascination for a particular subject or item or whatever. And it turned out his fascination was video games.
Mm.
So how neurotypical is that?
Right. So
You
it's
have to
okay.
distinguish what is a true interest versus an obsession.
Could
And
you
go ahead.
define like hyperlexia a little bit more? Like, I know you described like some of like the things for it, but like what the actual like definition of it is.
It's kind of an abnormal ability to read without a whole lot of instruction.
Gotcha. I don't think I've heard that term like used specifically for what that is. So I was like, what's the actual definition of that? Because I knew like what you were talking about,
Mm-hmm.
because to be honest, that's how I was like as a
Okay.
kid,
Same.
like growing up.
I
like
was reading at 3.
same. I was reading.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was reading super
My-
early, and I could add
Mhm.
and subtract and do like all of the things in like pre-K that nobody else in my class could do. And all of my teachers got really mad at my mom because they thought she was teaching me at home. And she was like, no, like, she just can do it after you show it to her like once or twice. And so
My oldest son, he's my only one that actually has an autism diagnosis. But his favorite word at the age of 2 was genealogy, and he could define it for you. And of course, at the time, I did not have that much information about autism. In fact, that was probably around the time that it was shifting, right, to recognize it as a spectrum and all of that, right? So there wasn't a whole lot of public knowledge. And so I didn't know what I was looking at, but I was pregnant with my second. And I think my midwife realized, because she had a lending library and she sent books home with you every time. And for like 4 months, every book she sent home with me was about autism.
she's
Like,
trying to be
okay,
subtle about it.
Right, like she saw it. Okay.
That's difficult, because sometimes you can see it in someone else's kid, and it's considered like really intrusive or really bad taste if you say something about that child. And I mean, if someone had seen it with my kids, I would have I might have been a little upset, but I would have appreciated it, because I would have looked at it, because I didn't know what to look for, especially with high
Same.
functioning. We all like, we're familiar with low functioning. That's what we might see on an after school special, but we don't understand the high functioning piece. And since my son had a language disorder, his favorite word was B, and every time he saw the letter B, he got really excited. And so before he was 2, he knew all his numbers and letters, or maybe you're somewhere around age 1. And so he would, when he saw letters, he watched the Sesame Street videos, and that's where he learned. And so he learned it all. And so he'd be going B, 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 or we're in Disneyland, and he'd see the exit signs, exit, 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 and we just thought he was kind of funny,
Right, because I didn't realize, like, there were things, doctors never said anything about him, except for the one time at the health department. He was only 7 months old, and he was cruising the furniture. And they told me, he's too young to be doing that. And I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? Like, knock him down? I can't stop him from doing it. But that's all they said. Like, they didn't tell me, like, this could be, like, developmentally, that's not typical, so we might want to look at things. Nobody ever said anything. And all the information at the time addressing autism was related, right, very small, and all related to developmental delays, not the areas where they're ahead.
Exactly.
And so we didn't realize until much later.
I would try to tell people that my son knew all his letters and numbers, and and here he wasn't even 2 yet, and they all thought I was lying, so I just stopped telling people. And then when my son got to preschool, that he got into the 1-year-old, I think it was the 1-year-old's room. They had like the infant room and then the 1-year-old rooms. And then one day I come in, and And one of the caregivers goes up to me, do you know Jerry knows all his letters and numbers? And they said, yes, but if I told you that, would you have believed me? You know, and he was really good with puzzles. You know, you'd buy those kid puzzles that had maybe 12 to 15 pieces, and he was done with it in like 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and he just look at it, and spatially he was just really good at that. And it was like, well, that's cool, you know, but I mean, and you know, the irony is, you know, I ended up in court over my son, you know, special ed court, because I want, you know, because of the behavior problems, et cetera, et cetera. And I wanted him to go to a special school. And the first day of court, my attorney, I guess, had she did this massive records request, and she found that there had been correspondence between an itinerant occupational therapist who used to come to the school and his kindergarten teacher mentioning autistic symptoms. And they actually had the OT come in and take a look at him, but nobody ever told me. So that didn't bode well for the school district, because here is somebody recognized this in kindergarten and nobody said a word or followed up or did any more evaluations. He'd never even had a triennial, you know, like an introductory assessment, because usually when they first go into special ed, you know, they assess their, you know, cognitive skills and, you know, and social emotional functioning. And he never got anything more than just a cursory speech evaluation for years.
Did they ever say why? Like, they didn't bring that up to you? Were they just like, I don't want to deal with it? Or
it was in court by then, so, you know, all I could do was guess.
that sucks. Like, I wonder how much could have been different if they had told you, like, right then and there. They were like, we suspect this could be happening. Because, like, it's better to say something and be like, oh, well, we thought it might be that, but it's not actually that. So
yeah, or just look at it, or just, you know, maybe have an assessor come in and say, hey, we never did all these assessments, you know, can we do them now? And I would have said yes.
Yeah.
But even then, you know, when he finally did get a true assessment through the school district at the age of 11, the assessor wasn't that sharp, and she just said he was emotionally fragile.
It's so hard, like, as they get older, because they get so much better at, like, masking it, and you can't get, like, kind of an organic read on, like, the kids.
Right. And two, I mean, you know, it gets easier to diagnose as they get older, because then there's specific learning profiles. Like, they may be great reading decoders, but they may not be great at comprehension. And they may not get the main idea. They'll get all the details memorized, but they don't really can't summarize what they've read. Writing becomes a problem because of, you know, the lack of theory of mind. They can't necessarily appreciate the audience they're writing for. Like, they might write a good narrative, like I did this, I did that, blah, blah, blah. But if they're trying to write a composition, you know, like where you're presenting facts, et cetera, they're, you know, and they may have problems, especially if they have executive functioning disorder, which my child had big executive functioning disorder. So without executive functioning, it's very hard to write a cohesive paragraph, let alone a complete essay or composition. And I mean, not all kids on the spectrum have this problem. If you ever looked in the book Far from the Tree by Andrew Solomon, the book is divided up into disability categories, and there within each category, like there's one, I call it like a mini book on autism, a mini book on psychopathy, a mini book on dyslexia. And they talk to parents and families who are experiencing this. And his definition of autism and autistic spectrums literally takes half a page, because he describes it so well, and all the possible indicators of autism and the autistic profile.
Question for you. Did he actually use the word psychopathy in his book, or did he use different language?
I'm trying to remember. I think it was I think he may have used just criminals, parents of
Mm.
criminals.
When was the book written? Do you know?
Oh, it would be 10 plus years ago.
What was the name of it again? I'm sorry, the title.
Far from the Tree.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
When you're, basically, I guess it goes like apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but here it is far from the tree because parents have produced a child that's really foreign to their knowledge,
So publication date was 2012.
Okay.
Yeah, the language was a lot different back then. It doesn't seem like that long ago, but the language changes like so rapidly
The
between like
90s was
every
10 years
year.
ago, okay?
Listen,
No,
if
no,
that
it's
was
not.
true,
La, la,
I
la,
would
la,
be
la, la,
I
can't
would be
hear
a
you.
baby.
I'm actually, Robin and I were talking last night, or texting rather. And one of the things and I don't know if you guys have already covered this, but how many years of experience between she and I, but I'm actually like, how many years of experience for all four of us? Like what's the total knowledge by lived experience and also by, sort of self-study?
With what specifically?
Special education, neurodevelopmentally, oh my gosh, neurodevelopmental disorders, that kind of thing. So, like, for example, I started volunteering around that in 11th grade. I would go and, push the kids. I would go retrieve them from the special trailer that wasn't attached to the school because, of course, and then I would, push them around and, like everybody else around us would just sort of like avert their eyes. And then but I'm like, hey, Amy, what's up? Oh my gosh. But then everybody else is like, I don't want to look at it. I don't want to look at it. Right. So I'm just wondering how long or how much of that type of like special needs thing, does that make sense?
Me personally, I've been parenting neurodivergent children since 2001. So 23 years. I was also raised by a parent who is on the autistic spectrum. So I didn't have a label for it, but I definitely understood how to navigate that from a very early age. So however you want to look at that. And then professionally speaking, so I don't know, probably 2 decades worth.
I don't really know.
Well, when did you first start working? I mean, I guess, did you sort of start working in the inpatient settings like early, or was there something that came before that? I guess kind of the moment in time when you started giving of yourself and acquiring knowledge to assist that particular community. Does that make more sense?
My mom is neurodivergent. She has ADHD, and I think something else. I don't know what it would be. She's never gotten diagnosed, but my grandpa is also OCD. And most of my family has some kind of something going on, but nobody wants to get diagnosed because we're from out back in the country of Oklahoma, out in the boonies. But I'm also neurodivergent, and I think from like a really young age, I was always like really into like playing with the kids that also were like high support needs, or like asking my mom questions about like kids with high support needs, because I was like, why don't other people want to play with them? They're cool people. And like they would just be in our classes. Like we didn't have separate special education classes really, because like our classes were so small.
And this was where again? And how, like, what was because you guys already had a push in rather than pull out model. So that's really awesome.
It was just in a very small town in Oklahoma, Idabel, Oklahoma. Like there were special education classes for like math and like reading, like extra support, but like they really didn't leave like our classrooms to go do other like special education classes. And so I was around like all kinds of like support level needs people like my whole entire life. And like the churches I went to, there was a girl who was very like high support needs. Like she had cerebral palsy and couldn't really like speak, and she needed all of like her ADLs like performed by other people. And so I would help with her sometimes. And then when I was in college, after I switched my degree to human services with a focus on people with disabilities, I started volunteering, and then I started working at a like home-based service facility. And so I was in their homes, like working with them, with people with all different kinds of disabilities and support needs. And then I did my internship with kids with support needs. And then just since then, like it's just been like every job I've had, really. So almost 30 years.
So, actually, I'm going to scrap that first question because certainly given the fact that the three of us are neurodivergent or had those members, people with neurodivergence in their families, I think maybe we just need to add all our ages together because we've literally been studying for,
Yeah.
Okay, no. So 47. So I'm going to turn 47 in a couple of weeks. And Robin, what about you? I mean, not when you turn 47, but how old are you?
I'm going to plead the fifth, and I'm going to go for 40 years.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, and then Carrie, I know you just said how old you were, but
I'll be 30 in June.
Okay, and then Summer.
I will be 43 by the time this airs.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah. So by the time this airs, I'll be 47 and you'll be 43. Oh my goodness. Okay. So, oh man, I texted Robin last night because I was like, we need to sort of math out how long we've known each other because I don't want to have to do math on the fly while we're recording. And what did I end up doing? That's awesome. So this is when I wish I had a math whiz in the house.
Now, see, if I had my son here, he would figure it out.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
How old were you,
He's
Carrie?
so good with numbers.
Do what?
How old are you again, Carrie?
I'll be 30 in June.
I'm just going to say 30 there. And so 160 all told.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah, I was just, that's.
I've got a calculator in front of me.
Oh my God. Well, why didn't you say that? Why did you just let me?
I didn't think about it until you said it, until you were discussing doing math. I'm like, wait a second, my phone has a calculator.
Oh my God. I thought you meant a literal calculator. And I was just like.
No, it's my phone. I use it to look up other things, look up answers we have, the questions we have while we're on.
We all have a calculator on our phone. So. I was thinking one of those big old Casio from like the scientific computer ones from back in the day. I was like, wow, you're going old school. That's really awesome.
I never learned how to use the scientific calculators, like the graphing calculators, like T80, whatever.
I think it was 84
model.
Or something.
I think it's up to like 6 now or something. But yeah, I failed business calc because I couldn't learn in college because I couldn't learn how to use the calculator. And getting the right answer wasn't good enough, so you couldn't do it by hand. You had to actually tell them the sequence of buttons you pushed, and I could never get it right, and so I failed business calculus.
That doesn't make sense.
Well, but if you're getting the answers right, but you're missing the breakdown, I think that's kind of the teacher's fault for not giving you the information that you need. If you can't use the calculator, why didn't he show you how to do that? That's his job. He's a teacher.
The problem is they were showing me, but I was doing something wrong clearly because I thought I was pushing the right buttons and I was still coming up with different things. So I was messing up a function somewhere. I don't think it was the instructor's fault. I think me and the calculator just did not get along.
Just some user error. It's okay.
I actually think that is the perfect metaphor for parents like us. Right. I didn't even know what buttons I was pushing or what they did. None of the
buttons are labeled when we're dealing with these kids.
How am I supposed to know which button to push? None of them are labeled. Oh my God.
They're all out of order.
The funny thing is like usually I found like when I go in for training for software or something and there's buttons to push, I would look down at the keyboard and they would do something they would move on to the next step while I was looking for the one key on the keyboard. And they were always, and I was always lost because
Every time.
I looked down to look for the button. And when I looked up, and then they moved on to the next thing, and it's like they just went too fast. I mean, I would come out of these sessions. I mean, even when I was my last place of employment, it's like, oh, let's look at this latest software, this and da. And all these people that can touch type, and I can't. That's my neurodivergent problem. Mm-hmm. Not that I haven't tried, but my hands just don't work. My fingers don't work that way. I have to look at the keys. They won't work automatically for some reason. Even, like my mom, my sister, they're all great typists, and I can't. And I've done it for years. I even had a teacher in high school who told me, well, dear, and this is a nun, well, dear, sometimes someone comes along and they really just can't do it. And I mean, I should have gotten an F in the class. She gave me a C because I spent more time in there than anybody else did trying to finish my assignments. And she knew I was doing my very best, and there just wasn't. She knew I couldn't do it, no matter how hard I tried, no matter how much time I spent. It just didn't work. And this was like a 5-day-a-week class.
Our teachers were mean to us and put the keyboard mats on top of your hands so you couldn't look down. Like, they would black it out. So if you wanted to look down at it, you had to like lift it up and they could see you do it, and you'd get in trouble for it.
Wow. I mean,
I would have been expelled.
There were so many kids in there that could just like and just be done. And I was like, okay. It took me like twice as long to learn as everybody else. I can do it now, but they could have been nicer about it.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too that I'm just thinking as we're talking about this, why are we not? Well, okay. I mean, I guess none of this stuff existed at the time, but I think it's really, really good to build in accessibility issues into whatever, not issues, solutions. Don't put the issues in there, to put in the solutions. Like, if it's, I can't type fast enough, or, I have to look down at the keyboard, and then things are going by so freaking fast that you can't, those of us who have that brain to finger, disconnect, everything goes way too fast for us, and we can't keep appropriate notes, and all of that stuff. And so that's I actually had never thought about like not being like physically able to type, and then you just sort of fail even though you're trying as hard as you can, and the teachers aren't recognizing that, and that's never going to be something you were able to do. And that's fine. You just work around it. But instead, no, you have to do what the district says. This is the only way through. Oh, you're in a wheelchair? I don't care. All students must climb up the stairs, right? Like, it's that sort of, not just you have to conform to society, but you have to make your body conform to things that do not work for you. And no, we will not assist you in finding some way to make it work. You just need to shove yourself into the round hole square peg kind of thing, right?
Try harder. No one recognizes a virtual wheelchair.
It makes me think, like, when I was doing home-based health, one of the ladies that I took care of, she was in her 30s, and she's autistic and blind, and her OT and PT got together and wanted her to like do all kinds of like things. Like, she would have to like match toys together, like little small toys together based on like how they felt. And that was part of like her OT. And she also loved writing, but she wanted to like type what she wrote, because she liked writing people letters at the end of the day and tell them like what she did. And so when she wanted to type and we couldn't figure out how to like make it work for her, they put a program on her computer that read the letters out for her as she typed them, and then would read the word at the end of like the word for her when she would hit like space.
Oh, wow.
And then when she got to the end of her letter, she knew to hit like a certain button, and it would read the whole letter out to her so she could tell if she was done or not. And then she knew how to like print it and stuff, and she would bring it to us in the house because she had memorized and mapped out the whole house. And I wish like more people could do stuff like that, like accessibility wise, like especially in school, because like there's no reason that they can't do it. Like it's not an expensive program, and it wasn't like crazy difficult. It just took her some time to like practice it, and she loved it. It brought her so much joy.
And that's part of why I keep my youngest still in online school. He first started when COVID shutdowns happened because everybody went virtual there for a while, but the school he had been in had never done it before, so their program was not very user friendly. So we switched to a virtual school, and he struggles. He has not been. I'm still fighting to get him an assessment because nobody wants to do the assessments. But I suspect he's dyslexic. His dad's dyslexic. I'm mildly dyslexic. It just is. But he has that weight. All of the curriculum has the option to read the passage or the word or whatever to you. So that lets him, when he's, to try to read it sometimes, but when he's tired or it's, really becoming a struggle at that moment, he can have it read to him, and it lets him still do his work and he's not falling behind. Whereas in brick and mortar school, that's what happened, right? He'd be struggling with reading because he's reading at about half the speed of everybody else. And so he's falling behind just because of his reading speed, because he's struggling with that. And so I think that is something that needs to be built into all curriculum.
Yeah, agreed.
I would be, I'm the advocate in me is coming out because that's my current job now, but I would be asking for an assistive technology assessment, because he should be able to use that in school, in brick and mortar school. And I've seen them, Google has a lot of stuff. It's not going to cost them a whole hell of a lot of money. Because I have seen other children getting it in schools here, at least in San Francisco. And it shouldn't be a big deal.
My frustration with getting those accommodations or even an IEP or anything, at least here in Oklahoma, my experience has been through the 5 children, who's my youngest, is that they want to delay, right?
Yep.
And
developmental delay.
Delay and deny. Yeah.
Exactly. We want to delay. Let's give some more accommodations. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But you're waiting 5 years because you're like, okay, we have to try this level, and there's 3 levels of accommodation, and you try each one for a year. And then after all of that fails, then you want to do an assessment. And then I'm like, you're waiting till they're in middle school. When I'm telling you my 5-year-old coming into your school needs extra supports, why are we waiting until they're, it's a problem. Well,
we do know why.
Well, I mean, this is something that, school districts, they get in their head. And I mean, I just dealt with this with a client the other day, is they're all taught the policies and procedures of the school district, but they're not taught federal law. And federal law says that they need to assess that kid. If there is the possibility that they need help, they're supposed to seek out and find children to help. And so, because we're composing a letter to a vice principal who wants to apply progressive discipline to a autistic child, and we have to remind him in a pleasant way that we understand that the school has policies and procedures. However, they are all superseded by federal law, and he has to follow federal law in this case for this child, because that's the protection that this child's entitled to.
Yeah.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And to be sure you never miss an upload, make sure you turn your notifications on. And please come join us on social media so we can continue these conversations in between episodes. You'll find us at Hypoxia Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.